In the frigid autumn of 1940, hundreds of cargo ships travel across the Atlantic. It's a desperate effort to keep Britain supplied in its war effort against Nazi Germany, but they're being decimated by enemy ships and submarines. In 1940 alone, Germany will sink over 1,000 Allied ships, and Britain is at risk of being starved of supplies. The Allies' response is brutally simple: find a way to build thousands of cargo ships, and build them faster than Germany can ever hope to sink them. In just 4 years, America will construct over 2,700 Liberty-class cargo ships, and each will be built not in months, but mere weeks, some in a matter of days. These ugly and hastily built ships will be loaded to the brim and sent overseas, and they're going to help the Allies win the war. By late 1940, much of Europe had fallen to Nazi Germany, and the British Commonwealth now stood alone in its fight. But the island nation was being starved of much-needed supplies for its war effort. German U-boats, warships, and aircraft were inflicting heavy losses to incoming shipping traffic, sinking ships faster than Britain could replace them. The United States, although not yet at war, was playing a vital role in supplying Britain in its war effort, and its enormous industrial capacity was critical to helping Britain stay in the fight. But with Germans sinking ships daily, Britain and America desperately needed a way to keep all that war material moving. The problem was, in the entire decade prior, America had only built a couple dozen ships. So, at the start of 1941, US President Franklin Roosevelt announces the Emergency Shipbuilding Program. It'll be an enormous effort to produce ships on an unprecedented scale, but to do that, they'll need to build a special kind of ship. Dreadful-looking objects. That's how President Roosevelt described Liberty ships when he first saw their design. Time magazine nicknamed them ugly ducklings. They're not much to look at, and from a design standpoint, there's also really nothing remarkable about them. With 10,000 tons of cargo capacity, they're a large ship for the day, but they're also obsolete. Their design is 60 years old, based off a British ship built in the 19th century. They're powered by an antiquated compound steam engine. They're underpowered. If the Atlantic seas are rough enough and moving in the wrong direction, Liberty might not be able to move forward at all. Most Liberties were given light defenses, a 3-inch bow gun and a 4 or 5-inch stern gun, along with anti-aircraft weaponry. They were crewed by 45 volunteer merchant marines and 1 or 2 dozen Navy armed guard. But in reality, the heroic men who served aboard these ships were vulnerable and paid a heavy price. But Liberty ships aren't remarkable for their capabilities out at sea. The history they made was in how they were built. Their design is deliberately basic, because that's what's going to allow for thousands to be built, with most being constructed in just a few weeks. And Liberty ships aren't expected to last. Their engineered lifespan is only 5 years. But if a Liberty ship can make just one single trip across the ocean with cargo, well, that's a success, worth the $2 million price tag. That's how desperate the situation was. The task of constructing Liberty ships will be assigned to 18 shipyards spread across the coastal United States, and they'll soon be producing Liberty ships at an incredible rate. By 1943, these shipyards will launch a new ship on average every 8 hours. And there's 2 revolutionary changes in shipbuilding that'll make this enormous feat possible. The first is welding. Up until this point, almost all ships were built by riveting pieces together, a slow process requiring skill and physical strength. But Liberty ships' workforce would not be skilled. Most would be plucked off farms, and nearly a third would be women. Welding would drastically speed up the assembly process. The second revolutionary step will bring assembly line logic to the shipbuilding industry. Instead of building a ship from start to finish, thousands of components will be manufactured at the same time at different locations, and then brought to the shipyard for final assembly. Where it used to take 6 months to construct a Liberty-sized ship, by 1944 it was taking on average only 42 days. And shipyards would compete to see how fast they could build them. One yard would finish a Liberty in a month, then another would break this record, doing it in just 3 weeks. Then in November of 1942, the Richmond Shipyards in California managed to build a Liberty in just 4 days and 15 hours. and then it broke in two. Okay, so not that particular Liberty ship, but some early Liberties did literally break in half. These ships were notorious for developing serious structural cracks. You see, welding instead of riveting meant that cracks could easily spread throughout the hull. Revolutionary changes in shipbuilding meant there were some kinks to work out. Out at sea, Liberty ships were vulnerable, not because they lacked serious defensive weaponry, but because they were slow. Convoys of Liberty ships, numbering 50 or 60, would lumber along at just 10 miles per hour. At full emergency speed, a Liberty ship could push 13 miles per hour, maybe, but a surface German U-boat could do 20 miles per hour, and that made Liberties easy prey, especially at night. To improve the odds, Liberty ships were guarded by escorts. More vulnerable Liberties, those loaded with munitions or fuel, would travel at the center of the formation. But serving on a Liberty was dangerous and stressful, and hundreds were sunk or critically damaged throughout the war. But by mid-1941, the sheer number of Liberties out at sea, along with an increase in their armed escorts, overwhelmed German forces. Advances in anti-submarine technologies also started stamping out the U-boat threat. By mid-1944, the United States began to focus on producing a new type of wartime cargo vessel, the Victory ship, which would never be produced on the scale that Liberties were, but they were larger and faster, making them far less vulnerable. After the war, many Liberties were put into the reserve fleet or sold off to post-war merchant cargo fleets. By the 1960s, their ancient design made them far too expensive to operate, and most were sold off for scrap. Today, only 3 remaining Liberties of 2,710 survive to remind us of their enormous contribution to winning the Second World War.